I'm Jessica Wilson, 37, and I never expected to be standing in my sister's hospital room that day. For years, my family treated my medical career like an expensive hobby, something I'd eventually give up. But everything changed when that nurse walked in, saw me standing there in my white coat, and bowed slightly. "Hello, Chief of Surgery," she said. The look on my family's faces was worth every sleepless night, every missed holiday, every doubt I'd ever faced. Before I tell you how I went from being the failure of my family to becoming Chief of Surgery, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated. Growing up in Lakeside, Michigan wasn't easy for a girl with big dreams. Our town was small enough that everyone knew everyone, and ambitions rarely extended beyond the county line. But I was different from the beginning. At 8 years old, while other girls were playing with dolls, I discovered my grandfather's old medical textbooks tucked away in our dusty attic. The detailed illustrations of the human heart fascinated me. I'd spend hours tracing the chambers, memorizing terms I could barely pronounce. My stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, became my first patient. I'd carefully operate on him using plastic scissors and band-aids, narrating each step like I'd seen doctors do on TV. "Scalpel," I'd say to no one in particular, while my mother watched from the doorway with a mixture of amusement and concern. My family had its own clear expectations for success. My father, Richard Wilson, built a chain of hardware stores across 3 counties and believed business was the only reliable path to security. "You know what people always need, Jesse? Tools and materials. Medicine is risky. People only come when they're desperate," he'd say, folding his newspaper at breakfast. My mother, Evelyn, had been Miss Northern Michigan 1985 before transitioning into a successful real estate career. She valued appearance and social connections above all else. In her world, women achieved success through charm and well-planned marriages, not grueling academic pursuits. Then there was my older sister Rachel, the golden child who inherited our mother's beauty and social grace. By 16, she was already winning pageants and dating the sons of prominent local families. She followed our mother into real estate and was a natural at charming clients and closing deals. My younger brother Michael was the athletic star, captain of every team, and our father's pride. He showed an early knack for business, selling more chocolate bars for school fundraisers than anyone else in the district's history. His path into our father's business was predetermined and celebrated. And then there was me. Too bookish, too serious, too focused on things no one in our family understood. When I announced my intention to become a surgeon at 15, during a Sunday family dinner, my father's reaction was swift and dismissive. He laughed, not meanly, but with genuine disbelief. "Medical school? Do you have any idea how expensive and difficult that is? And for what? To work yourself to death, while entrepreneurs like your brother make real money." My mother set down her fork delicately. "Sweetie, have you thought about nursing? Or maybe pharmacy? Something more suitable." What she meant was something more suitable for a woman, something that wouldn't require decades of training, something that would still allow time for marriage and children, the markers of female success in her eyes. Rachel smirked across the table. "Come on, Jess. You fainted when Michael cut his finger last summer. How are you going to cut people open?" She was referring to an incident when I was 12 before I'd started studying biology seriously. Only my grandfather, a retired high school science teacher, showed any faith in my dream. "The Wilson women have always been smarter than they let on," he told me privately, slipping me a gift card to the bookstore for more science books. "Don't let them dim your light." He passed away during my junior year of high school. The last words he whispered to me were, "Show them all, Jesse." Despite the lack of encouragement at home, I threw myself into my science classes. Mrs. Brennan, my biology teacher, became an unexpected ally, staying after school to help me prepare for advanced placement exams and encouraging me to enter the state science fair. My project on cardiac function in response to different stimuli won first place, earning me a feature in the local newspaper. While my parents dutifully hung the article on the refrigerator, They were far more animated about Rachel's runner-up finish in the state beauty pageant the same weekend and Michael's football scholarship offers. "That's nice, Jessie," my mother said about my win, before turning to Rachel. "Now tell everyone about that gorgeous evening gown you wore for the talent portion." I learned early to celebrate my own victories quietly, storing them away as fuel for the journey ahead. Getting accepted to the University of Michigan's prestigious pre-med program should have been cause for celebration. Instead, it became another point of contention. My father balked at the tuition costs, despite having paid for Rachel's business degree at a private college without complaint. "We'll help with some expenses," he said, "but you'll need to work to cover the rest. Maybe that'll help you decide if this is really worth it." The financial reality meant I moved into a tiny apartment with 3 other students, all of us cramped into a space meant for 2. I took a job at the campus coffee shop, working early mornings before classes and weekend shifts when I should have been studying. I served lattes to classmates whose parents covered all their expenses, who had the luxury of full-time focus on their studies. The academic environment was nothing like high school, where I'd easily been at the top of my class. Here, everyone had been the best, and the competition was fierce. The pre-med students formed study groups that often excluded newcomers, protecting their potential class rankings with territorial determination. Organic chemistry became my nemesis. Despite hours of study, I failed the first major exam, scoring a devastating 58% that felt like a personal indictment. When I called home, seeking some comfort, my father's response was predictable. "Maybe this is a sign, Jessie. There's no shame in trying something and realizing it's not for you. Your sister's brokerage is always looking for new agents, and you've got a good head for numbers. Come home and try something else." Rachel wasn't any more supportive when she called later that week. "Don't feel bad," she said, her voice dripping with that special blend of pity and satisfaction that only siblings can achieve. "Not everyone is cut out for that kind of pressure. And honestly, do you really want to spend your 20s studying while the rest of us are actually living our lives?" The temptation to give up was real. I spent one entire weekend in bed, curtains drawn, considering my options. But on Monday morning, something pulled me out of bed and into the chemistry department's office hours. That's where I met Dr. Amanda Taylor, an associate professor who would change the course of my life. Unlike many of the other faculty who seemed to take pride in weeding out students, Dr. Taylor believed in developing potential. "You're not failing because you can't understand the material," she told me after reviewing my exam. "You're failing because you're approaching it with the wrong techniques. Let me show you how I think about these reactions." Dr. Taylor became more than a professor. She became my mentor and the first person since my grandfather who truly believed I could succeed in medicine. Under her guidance, I learned new study strategies, joined a supportive study group of other first-generation college students, and gradually improved my grades. By the end of freshman year, I had pulled my organic chemistry grade up to AB+. By sophomore year, I was tutoring other students. And by junior year, I had the highest GPA in my biochemistry seminar. Still, family gatherings remained exercises in emotional resilience. During Thanksgiving break of my junior year, Rachel announced her engagement to Thomas, a wealthy real estate developer 10 years her senior. The dinner table erupted in excitement. My mother immediately began discussing wedding venues while my father and Thomas talked property investments. When the attention finally shifted, Michael shared that he would be joining our father's business after graduation, with plans to open a new location in Grand Rapids. More toasts, more celebration. "What about you, Jessie? Any news?" my aunt finally asked, almost as an afterthought. I mentioned my recent acceptance to 3 medical schools, including one with a partial scholarship. There were polite nods and a quick, "That's nice," before my mother steered the conversation back to wedding plans. Later that evening, I overheard her talking to a friend in the kitchen. "At least 2 of my children know what they're doing with their lives," she said with a sigh. "Jessica is still on this doctor kick. All that education, and for what? She'll be in debt forever." The words stung, but they also hardened my resolve. I would show them that my path, though different, was no less valuable than theirs. Medical school began with a mixture of exhilaration and terror. I moved to Ann Arbor alone, my belongings fitting into my used Honda Civic. The campus hummed with the energy of new beginnings, and for the first time, I was surrounded by people who shared my passion and understood my goals. During orientation, I met Sophia and Marcus, who would become my closest friends and study partners. Sophia, a brilliant woman from California whose parents had emigrated from Ethiopia, wanted to specialize in pediatrics. Marcus, a former EMT from Chicago, was interested in emergency medicine. Together, we formed a tight-knit group, supporting each other through the grueling first year of lectures, labs, and exams. It wasn't until our clinical rotations began in the second year that I truly found my calling. The first time I assisted in a surgery, a routine appendectomy, I felt a clarity and focus I'd never experienced before. Time seemed to slow down in the operating room, and the complexities of the human body revealed themselves in ways textbooks could never capture. "You have steady hands," the attending surgeon commented. "And you don't flinch." Good qualities for a surgeon. Those simple words of validation meant more to me than any praise I'd received before. But my growing confidence faced constant challenges, particularly from the old guard of surgery. Dr. Nathaniel Edwards, a cardiothoracic surgeon in his 60s, made no secret of his views on women in surgery. The surgical field requires stamina, decisive thinking, and commitment that most women simply can't provide, he told our rotation group during rounds. Especially once they start having children. "I've seen it 100 times. Women train for years then drop to part-time or quit altogether when babies come along. It's a waste of educational resources." His eyes lingered on me as he spoke, as if daring me to contradict him. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my determination doubled. I would prove him wrong, not with words but with performance. I volunteered for extra shifts, arrived earlier than anyone else, stayed later, read more, practiced suturing techniques until my fingers cramped. I sacrificed sleep, social life, even basic comforts to prove I belonged in that operating room. The personal costs were high. I missed Rachel's lavish wedding because it fell during a crucial surgical rotation. "It's just typical," she complained on the phone. "You always choose your career over family." When I did manage to attend Michael's more modest wedding the following year, I spent most of the reception fielding questions from relatives about when I would get a real job and settle down. My father cornered me by the bar, drink in hand. "Still playing doctor, huh?" he said, the familiar dismissive tone cutting through the wedding music. "You know, there's a difference between persistence and stubbornness, Jesse." For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being stubborn? Was I sacrificing too much for a goal that might never fully accept me? That doubt disappeared during my surgery rotation at Detroit Medical Center. The senior resident had fallen ill with food poisoning, leaving our team shorthanded during a busy weekend. A trauma case came in, a construction worker with a penetrating chest injury from a fall onto rebar. The attending surgeon, Dr. Rivera, was overwhelmed with another critical case. "Wilson, you're with me on this one," he said, surprising everyone by choosing a medical student for such a complex case. For 4 intense hours, I assisted as we worked to repair the damage, controlling bleeding, removing metal fragments, and ultimately saving the man's life. Throughout the procedure, Dr. Rivera tested me with questions about anatomy, surgical approaches, potential complications, and I answered each one correctly. As we scrubbed out, exhausted but triumphant, he nodded at me. "You're going to be a hell of a surgeon, Wilson. I'm putting in a recommendation for you to subintern with cardiothoracic next rotation." In that moment, covered in blood and bone dust, I felt truly confident in my path for the first time. Despite my family's doubts, despite the systemic challenges, despite everything, I knew I was exactly where I belonged. When I decided to specialize in cardiac surgery, one of the most competitive and demanding specialties, I didn't tell my family until after I had already been accepted to the program. Their predictable lack of enthusiasm couldn't touch the pride I felt in my accomplishment. Surgical residency redefined my understanding of human endurance. The 80-hour work week mandated by regulations often stretched to 90 or 100 hours in reality. I learned to sleep standing up, to eat while walking, to function on amounts of rest that would debilitate most people. My first year as a surgical resident at Massachusetts General Hospital blurred into an endless cycle of pre-rounds, rounds, surgeries, notes, and brief periods of unconsciousness that barely qualified as sleep. I shared a cramped apartment with two other residents who I rarely saw awake simultaneously. The physical exhaustion was matched only by the emotional toll. The first time I lost a patient, a 42-year-old mother of three whose aortic dissection progressed too quickly, I locked myself in a supply closet and sobbed for exactly 3 minutes before composing myself and returning to the floor where 3 other patients needed me. Learning came through a brutal process of trial and error. My first major surgical error happened during my second year, a misplaced suture during a valve repair that required the attending to step in and correct. Dr. Winters, the attending, berated me in front of the entire surgical team, his words cutting deeper than any scalpel. "If you can't handle basic technique under pressure, maybe you should reconsider your specialty, Dr. Wilson," he said, his voice cold with contempt. I spent the next week practicing suturing techniques for hours each night, using orange peels to simulate tissue until my fingers bled. When a similar case came in the following month, I performed flawlessly. "Impressive improvement," Dr. Winters noted, the closest thing to praise he ever offered. The personal sacrifices mounted. I missed Michael's son's christening, my mother's 60th birthday celebration, and countless family gatherings. Each absence widened the gulf between my world and theirs. Even my relationship with Daniel, a fellow doctor in nephrology, couldn't survive the demands of surgical residency. After 6 months of canceled dates and half-asleep conversations, he ended things. "I need someone who can actually be present in a relationship, Jessica," he said gently. "And right now, surgery is your true partner." He wasn't wrong. The operating room had become my sanctuary, the place where everything else fell away and only the work remained, precise, demanding, vital work that fulfilled me in ways nothing else could. My technical skills improved rapidly. I developed a reputation for steady hands even during the most complex procedures. When my research on minimally invasive approaches to mitral valve repair was published in the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery, I sent a copy to my parents. My mother called to acknowledge receiving it but admitted she couldn't make heads or tails of all that medical jargon. During my third year, I was invited to present my research at a conference in Chicago. The timing coincided with a family gathering, but for once, I prioritized my professional development without guilt. Dr. Elizabeth Chun, my chief resident, noticed my dedication and technical skill. "You have potential for leadership, Wilson," she told me after watching me manage a complex case. "You think beyond the immediate surgical field to the entire patient journey. That's rare." Her words gave me confidence I hadn't realized I needed. Midway through my fourth year, my father had a minor heart attack. I was in the middle of a 36-hour shift when Rachel called. "Dad's in the hospital," she said, her voice tight with worry. "The doctors say it was a mild heart attack." "Mom's freaking out. Can you come home?" I couldn't leave in the middle of my shift, but I called the cardiologist treating my father and discussed his case in detail. Based on the information, I recommended a specific approach to his treatment and sent relevant research papers to his doctor. Initially, my family seemed grateful for my medical insight. But a week later, when I finally managed to visit, my mother pulled me aside. "We appreciate your input, dear, but we decided to go with what Dr. Phillips suggested instead. We needed a real cardiologist's opinion, you understand." I felt as though she had slapped me. After all these years, after everything I had accomplished, they still couldn't see me as a real doctor. The hurt ran deep, but I channeled it into determination. If my own family couldn't recognize my expertise, I would earn recognition that no one could deny. Completing my residency at Massachusetts General Hospital was both an ending and a beginning. At the graduation ceremony, I was honored as chief resident, an acknowledgement of both my surgical skill and leadership abilities. As I accepted the award, I scanned the audience, half hoping to see my family despite not having invited them. They weren't there, of course, but Dr. Taylor had made the trip from Michigan to support me. "I knew you'd prove them all wrong," she said afterward, hugging me tightly. "This is just the beginning for you, Jessica." Job offers came from several prestigious institutions: Stanford, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins. But when Detroit Medical Center reached out with an opportunity to join their expanding cardiac surgery department, something pulled me back toward Michigan. Perhaps it was a subconscious desire to succeed in proximity to those who had doubted me most. I accepted the position and moved into a comfortable apartment in downtown Detroit, establishing my first real home after years of temporary living situations. The hospital welcomed me enthusiastically, especially after my innovative approach to a complex aortic repair during my first month garnered attention from the medical community. 6 months into my tenure, I faced a case that would change the trajectory of my career. Patricia Sullivan, a 63-year-old grandmother, was referred to me after 3 other surgical teams had deemed her inoperable. Her complex congenital heart defect, compounded by decades of compensation and scarring, presented a surgical puzzle that conventional approaches couldn't solve. For 3 days, I studied her scans, consulted with colleagues across the country, and ultimately designed a hybrid approach that combined elements of several established techniques. The surgery lasted 14 hours, with moments where success hung by a thread, but Patricia survived and recovered with better cardiac function than she'd had in 20 years. Word spread through the cardiac surgery community. I began receiving referrals for complex cases that others considered too risky. My surgical outcomes consistently exceeded expectations, and my waiting list grew longer. Contact with my family had dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional text message. When my mother mentioned a neighbor's son who had become some kind of doctor too, I realized they still viewed my career as just another job, not the calling it truly was. Professional recognition accelerated rapidly. The American Journal of Cardiology featured my innovative technique as their cover story, naming me one of the surgeons to watch in their annual review. Invitations to speak at conferences filled my inbox. I traveled to Tokyo, London, and Sao Paulo to demonstrate surgical techniques to international colleagues. With my growing reputation came opportunities to mentor others. I started a Women in Surgery initiative at the hospital, providing support and guidance to female medical students and residents facing the same barriers I had encountered. Seeing their determination reflected my own journey and reinforced my commitment to changing the culture of surgery. "You show us it's possible," said Amara, a brilliant second-year resident. "Not just to survive in this field, but to excel and lead." I was so focused on my patients and protégés that I barely noticed the political shifts occurring within hospital leadership until Dr. Franklin, the current chief of surgery, announced his plans to retire 2 years earlier than expected. Health concerns, he told the department heads at our quarterly meeting, though rumors suggested a lucrative consulting opportunity, was the real motivation. The board will begin the search process immediately. The presumptive successor was Dr. James Peterson, a competent general surgeon whose father sat on the hospital board. He had 5 fewer years of experience than I did, and a surgical outcome record that was good but not exceptional. Yet the whispered consensus was that the position was essentially his. That evening, I sat in my office late into the night, contemplating whether to put myself forward for consideration. The chief position would mean less time in the operating room but more influence over surgical protocols, research directions, and departmental culture. It would mean a chance to implement changes I had envisioned for years. After hours of deliberation, I drafted my letter of interest to the board. Whatever the outcome, I refused to let assumption and tradition prevent me from even trying. The worst they can say is no, I told myself, and I've heard that plenty of times before. The selection process for chief of surgery was more grueling than I anticipated. The initial interview with the hospital board, 12 members, only 2 of whom were women, felt like defending a dissertation while standing in quicksand. Every question seemed designed to probe for weakness or hesitation. "Dr. Wilson, you've had an impressive surgical career thus far," began Dr. Watkins, the board chairman. But the chief position requires administrative skills, budget management, and leadership across multiple surgical specialties. What makes you think you're qualified? I outlined my experience managing the cardiac surgical team during Dr. Henderson's sabbatical, the research grant I'd secured for the department, and my strategic vision for integrating new technologies while maintaining the human element of surgical care. Medicine is evolving rapidly, I concluded. We need leadership that embraces innovation while honoring the fundamentals of excellent patient care. I offer both. The second round required a formal presentation of my 5-year vision for the surgery department. I spent weeks preparing, analyzing department metrics, identifying inefficiencies, and developing solutions that would improve both patient outcomes and physician satisfaction. My presentation day coincided with rumors that Dr. Peterson had already been measured for the chief's office furniture. Rather than discouraging me, this galvanized my determination to make my case so compelling they couldn't ignore it. As the selection process continued, the competition grew increasingly unpleasant. Anonymous notes questioning my commitment appeared in my mailbox. Scheduling errors placed me in 2 locations simultaneously. Whispers about my personal life. Suggestions that my single status indicated a lack of balance or inability to maintain relationships circulated among staff. I refused to engage in similar tactics, focusing instead on continued surgical excellence and building relationships across departments. When asked directly about my competitor during my final interview, I praised his strengths while differentiating my approach. Dr. Peterson is an excellent surgeon with strong institutional knowledge, I said. My own approach emphasizes innovation, interdisciplinary collaboration, and mentorship. Both perspectives have value for the future of this department. After 6 weeks of interviews, presentations, and deliberations, I was called to the board chairman's office on a Friday afternoon. Dr. Watkins' expression gave nothing away as I took the seat across from his desk. The board has reached its decision regarding the chief of surgery position, he began formally. This was not an easy choice, given the caliber of candidates. My heart pounded as he continued with what felt like an unnecessarily extended preamble about the hospital's commitment to excellence and forward-thinking leadership. Finally, he smiled. We would like to offer you the position, Dr. Wilson. Your vision for the department aligned most closely with the hospital's strategic goals, and your surgical outcomes speak for themselves. In that moment, the weight of every doubt, every dismissal, every obstacle I had overcome crashed over me. I maintained my professional composure, thanking him and discussing next steps, but in the privacy of my car afterward, I allowed myself a moment of pure, unfiltered joy. At 37, I had become the youngest chief of surgery in Detroit Medical Center's history and the first woman ever to hold the position. Local media covered the appointment, and congratulations poured in from colleagues across the country. I celebrated quietly with Dr. Taylor, who had become a dear friend and mentor, and a small group of colleagues who had supported my journey. I didn't share the news with my family. Our communications had become so infrequent and superficial that it seemed almost irrelevant to them. Rachel occasionally sent photos of her children or updates about her real estate successes. My parents called on my birthday and major holidays. No one ever asked about my career beyond generic inquiries about whether I was still enjoying the hospital work. 3 weeks into my new role, I was working late in my office when my phone rang with Rachel's number. Unusual for her to call at this hour, I answered with concern. Rachel, is everything okay? Her voice sounded strained, frightened in a way I'd never heard before. Jess, I don't know what's happening to me. I've been having these episodes, chest pain, trouble breathing, dizziness. The local doctor ran tests, but says everything looks normal. But something is definitely wrong. As she described her symptoms in more detail, alarm bells rang in my mind. The constellation of symptoms suggested a rare cardiac condition that often went undiagnosed until catastrophic failure. Rachel, I need you to come to Detroit Medical Center right away, I said, my voice calm but firm. These symptoms need proper evaluation with advanced imaging we have here. Can't you just recommend someone closer? I'm in Grand Rapids now, and the kids. No, I interrupted, something I rarely did with my family. This isn't something to mess around with. Pack a bag and come to DMC. I'll arrange everything. Perhaps it was the authority in my voice or the seriousness of my tone, but Rachel agreed, promising to drive over the following morning with Thomas. After hanging up, I immediately arranged for the necessary specialists to be available and reserved time in our advanced imaging suite. If my suspicions were correct, Rachel would need expert care immediately. I received the text that she had checked in while I was completing morning rounds. My family would be arriving at the hospital shortly, still unaware of my position. After years of dismissal and doubt, they were about to enter my domain, where my expertise was not only recognized but revered. The hospital lobby was crowded with the usual morning activity when I spotted them. My mother's perfectly coiffed blonde hair, my father's tall frame, Thomas's worried expression, and Rachel in a wheelchair looking pale and frightened. They hadn't seen me yet, giving me a moment to observe them from a distance. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than the giants of doubt they had been in my mind for so long. My mother was scanning the reception area, presumably looking for me, while my father spoke with the admissions clerk. I approached them in my chief of surgery attire, white coat with my name and title embroidered in blue, hospital ID, and the custom stethoscope my surgical team had given me upon my appointment. For a moment, no one recognized me. I had become someone else entirely in this environment. "Jessica," my mother said finally, moving to hug me. "Thank goodness you're here." "Rachel's been feeling terrible." My father nodded curtly. "Good of you to meet us. Which doctor will be seeing her? We like to get this sorted quickly." They still didn't understand. Even here in my hospital, they couldn't see me as the medical authority I was. "I've assembled a team of specialists," I explained calmly. "But first, I'd like to examine Rachel myself and review her preliminary tests." My father frowned. "We appreciate the help navigating the system, Jesse, but we need the actual cardiac specialists." Rather than arguing, I simply nodded to the admissions clerk who had been watching our interaction with interest. "Please take Mrs. Parker to the VIP suite on 7. I'll be up shortly." "Yes, Dr. Wilson," she replied with immediate deference. As we walked toward the elevators, the subtle shifts in hospital staff behavior around me began to register with my family. Security guards nodded respectfully. Nurses paused their conversations to acknowledge me. Residents stepped aside to let our group pass. "Do you work with a lot of patients here?" my mother asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Something like that," I replied as we entered the elevator. The VIP suite was our best private room, reserved for dignitaries and major donors. I'd arranged it for Rachel not out of familial preference, but because it was adjacent to our most advanced monitoring equipment. As we entered, a nurse was finishing setting up the room. She turned and immediately straightened her posture when she saw me. With a slight bow of her head, she said clearly, "Hello, Chief of Surgery. The patient's preliminary tests are ready for your review." The silence that followed was deafening. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me in shock. "Chief of..." My father began. "Surgery," I completed calmly. "Yes. I was appointed 3 weeks ago." Rachel's wide eyes met mine from the hospital bed where she was being settled. For the first time in our adult lives, I saw something new there, not competition or dismissal, but genuine astonishment and perhaps a hint of admiration. "You never told us," my mother said quietly. "You never asked," I replied simply, then turned my attention to Rachel's care. "I need to examine you now. Would you prefer privacy?" The next hours were a blur of professional activity. The advanced imaging confirmed my suspicions. Rachel had a congenital heart condition that had gone undetected her entire life. The recent symptoms indicated deterioration that would require surgical intervention. In the consultation room afterward, I explained the diagnosis to my family with the same calm precision I used with all patients' families. The difference was watching their expressions shift between medical concern for Rachel and personal realization about who I had become. "So she needs surgery," my father summarized after I'd explained everything. "Who's the best surgeon for this at your hospital?" I met his gaze directly. "I am." For the first time in my memory, my father looked at me with genuine respect. Not as his daughter who had chosen an unusual path, but as a medical professional whose expertise was critical to his family's well-being. "Then we're lucky to have you," he said quietly. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. I spent the evening reviewing Rachel's scans again, consulting with colleagues, and planning every detail of the procedure. This wasn't just any surgery. This was my sister, and despite our complicated relationship, I was determined to give her the best possible care. Before scrubbing in, I visited Rachel's room where my parents were keeping vigil. "I'm scared, Jess," Rachel admitted, looking vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. I took her hand, the same confident touch I'd used to reassure countless patients. "This is what I do, Rachel, and I'm very, very good at it." The 6-hour procedure was among the most focused of my career. Every cut, every suture, every decision was made with absolute precision. My surgical team worked with the seamless coordination that comes from mutual respect and extensive training. When I finally closed Rachel's chest and confirmed stable cardiac function, the relief was profound. I stepped back from the table, thanked my team, and went to speak with my waiting family. The surgery was successful, I told them in the consultation room. Rachel's heart is now functioning properly, and with continued care and medication, she should make a full recovery. My mother burst into tears, embracing me in a way she hadn't since I was a child. My father stood awkwardly for a moment before extending his hand formally, then pulling me into a gruff hug. "Thank you," he whispered. "I was wrong about you, Jessie. So wrong." During Rachel's week-long recovery, my family witnessed firsthand the respect I commanded in the hospital. They saw residents seeking my guidance, nurses implementing my orders without question, and patients regarding me with trust and gratitude. On the day before Rachel's discharge, she asked to speak with me alone. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, her voice still weak but sincere. "All these years, I thought you were just, I don't know, playing at being a doctor or something. I never understood what you were building." "Few people did," I replied without bitterness.
"I'm sorry, Jess.
For not believing in you, for all the dismissive comments, for everything." I adjusted her foreline, a small professional gesture that now carried personal meaning. "Thank you for saying that." "How did you do it?" she asked. "Keep going when none of us supported you?" I considered this question carefully. I found people who did support me. Mentors, colleagues, friends who understood the path I was on. And honestly, sometimes the doubt from others became fuel. Every dismissal just made me more determined to succeed. 6 months later, my parents hosted a family dinner at their home, the first in years where I wasn't an afterthought or obligation. My father had insisted I attend, being uncharacteristically persistent in finding a date that worked with my schedule. When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just my immediate family, but extended relatives as well. As I entered the dining room, my father clinked his glass for attention. "I want to propose a toast," he announced, "to my daughter, Dr. Jessica Wilson, Chief of Surgery at Detroit Medical Center, and the reason my other daughter is still with us today. We haven't always understood or supported your choices, Jessie, but you've shown us all what determination and brilliance can accomplish. We're proud of you." The words I had longed to hear for decades washed over me. They were gratifying, yes, but I realized something important as I looked around at my family's admiring faces. I no longer needed their validation. Somewhere along my journey, I had become complete without it. That evening, as conversations flowed more easily than they ever had, I reflected on the strange circular path that had brought me here. The little girl with the medical textbooks had become exactly who she had dreamed of being, not because of family support, but despite its absence. The journey had made me not just a better surgeon, but a stronger person. I had learned to find my own validation, to trust my judgment, to persevere when retreat seemed easier. These lessons served me daily in the operating room and in life. I had also learned the complicated art of forgiveness, not the easy forgiveness that comes with an apology, but the deeper forgiveness that comes from understanding that people can only support dreams they can envision. My family's limited view wasn't malice but limitation, and recognizing that difference had freed me from years of resentment. As I drive home from the hospital now, after long days saving lives and building a department that reflects my values, I sometimes think about that nurse who unknowingly changed everything with 6 simple words. Hello, Chief of Surgery. Her deference in that moment forced my family to see me through others' eyes, as an authority, an expert, a leader. But the truth is, I was all those things before they recognized it. And that might be the most important lesson of all. Your value exists whether others acknowledge it or not. The real victory isn't in proving doubters wrong. It's in becoming exactly who you were meant to be. What obstacles have you overcome to pursue your dreams? Have you ever been underestimated by those closest to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their dreams are valid, even when others don't understand them. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the people who know you longest aren't the ones who see you clearest. Trust your own vision of what's possible.